Joshua Hebbert is currently in Bornholm, Denmark. Is that the correct way to pronounce that?
Yep.
I have been around enough Scandinavian things that I like to think I know how to pronounce all of them. Um, and Joshua is originally from rural Nebraska, or rural Western Nebraska, now living in Denmark, where he's a ceramic technician for the Royal Danish Academy. Josh received his BFA at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, and his MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder. Before relocating to Denmark, he spent 6 years in Philadelphia, where he was a resident at the Clay Studio and taught at a variety of institutions, including the Maryland Institute College of Art. Hebbert's ceramic practice is centered on experimentation and mold making as a generative process to create slip cast vessels, which are with organically modeled colors. His process includes using plaster molds to capture prototypes, then layering colored slips to reflect and play with different moments in an interior and exterior space. After taking these slip cast pots out of their molds, Hebbert carves off the outer layers, unearthing unpredictable shapes and patterns. He poetically likens this process to constellations being visible in the night sky. Shapes shift and evolve and transform, and really ties in well with our space theme. So, we're excited to learn more from you today. Joshua, do you want a specific one of your cameras spotlighted for this?
I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll see as we go along.
Yeah, sorry, I kept being confused about, I have my camera, I have my phone up here and my computer down here. So I'll just use my computer to share screen.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. And I apologize for the way my voice sounds. It's a little crackly. I'm coming off of being sick.
Oh. I'm also a little, I think I just haven't drank enough water today, but, and I've been talking to students and talking a lot today. So I'm also just a little hoarse, but it's nothing bad. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Maria, and thank you for having me a part of the American Pottery Festival this year. Even though I'm no longer in America, I'm really happy to be a part of the really stellar group, and sorry that I can't be there, but very happy to be able to show you a little bit of my process. And if we have time, I can give you a little tour of the school here in Bornholm. Like she said, I'm got my BFA from Creighton University and then MFA from University of Colorado Boulder. And I like to start talking about my process with this image from John Baldessari. It's from a series he did called Throwing 3 Balls in the Air to Get a Straight Line, Best of 36 Attempts. And so you have, and this is 1973, and so you have this group of artists in the late 60s, early 70s, really developing conceptual art and really process-oriented art. And I took a lot of inspiration from them in graduate school. And then in thinking about how I wanted to present my work to you today, I wanted to kind of harken back to that inspiration, because I think it makes more sense to me now in a lot of ways in my current pot making process than I really thought at the time. So here's another attempt. And so what he's doing is he has this kind of absurd task that he's laying out. So trying to throw 3 balls in the air in the attempt to get all 3 of them, to get a photograph of them all in a straight line. And I like this, it deals a lot with geometry, it deals a lot with lines, it deals a lot with like objects in space, but then also the flattening of that into an image. And I like all of that, but it's all started with this kind of absurd process or kind of silly rules that he makes for himself that he has to follow. So you'll see kind of how that folds into my work in a little bit. Around the same time, you have Robert Morse making this image. It's called Blind Time 1. And what he did was he put a blindfold on, and then he dipped his fingerprints in ink, and then blindly, very methodically, he moved both of his hands, trying to keep them at the same height as they went down the page. And he tried to do this in 60 seconds. This is actually, it took him 68 seconds, but you can tell how the mark making was really important to him, but it all stemmed from this system that he laid out for himself before he even got started. So he set up this system and then tried to follow his own rules that he did put for himself. A little bit of a different way of making an image. We have Ed Ruscha and this is he made a book called From 34 Parking Lots in 1967. So a little bit before the other two artists, but I really love these images. I like thinking about this empty space of the parking lot, but you can see all of the remnants of the cars that were there when they were parked with their oil drips and their tire tracks. And you can see the path and the history of the cars coming in and parking and then circling around and going back out. And there's something really dynamic about this image where you can see the history of the cars and the marks that they made and how all of those layered together. So another image from this is this image, and you can see this is, if you can see my cursor, you can see the building for the parking lot, and then this is the parking lot where all of the cars park. And so you can see the oil drips from the cars building up over time closer to the building. And then as you get farther away from the building, you get less and less of those oil marks. And yeah, so it's another way to see the history of this space through the marks that have been made on the surface, on the asphalt. And so you can see the history of the space, even though you don't see any cars. And so I think that there's just something really nice about the layering that happens in these images, but then also the history and the patterns that emerge kind of organically from the space. So my main inspiration from this time period is Sol LeWitt. So this is the first Sol LeWitt that I saw in person at the Joslin Art Museum in Omaha, Nebraska, when I was studying at Creighton. And I really love Sol LeWitt's pieces because there's some sort of structure, there's some sort of logic behind them, but a lot of times that logic is not apparent when you first look at it. And so for me, it's kind of like a visual Rubik's Cube or like a visual puzzle that you kind of have to solve and walk around and try to figure out. And so I really like that about this piece in particular. Sorry, I needed to take some water. So some of his other works are wall drawings. And so a lot of his work is made from, he makes these kind of scripts or recipes or directions for other artists to recreate his work. And so a lot of his wall drawings are in this vein. And so this one is wall drawing number 305. The 35th point is located where two lines would cross. The first line were drawn from the first point and midpoint of the bottom side, and the second line were drawn from a point halfway between the center of the wall and the midpoint of the top side to a point halfway between the midpoint of the bottom side and the lower right corner and the lower right corner. So I'm not really interested in understanding that, but I can see it, and I can see how that creates a larger image, and be really interested in that. So this is another description that but I just wanted to show this because he's setting up this systematic way of, almost mathematical way of making an artwork. And then he just has to make the rules, and then it's almost like a machine where the person who's recreating the piece is just following his rules and kind of doing exactly what he says. So again, making this kind of system and then just following the steps in order to create the end result. This is his wall drawing 797. And so this has been, all of his wall drawings have been recreated multiple times. And so this one is a line drawn from the left side to the right side of a wall in red, followed by another line close to but not touching, drawn in yellow, followed by another line close to but not touching in blue, and then it repeats those primary colors over and over again. And so this is one iteration of that piece, and then this is another one. So there's this opportunity for chance and for change and for variety. Even though the rules are the same, there's this like really big opportunity for every piece to be very different and every piece to be really expressive in its own way. So I'll end with the silhouette variations on incomplete open cubes. So this one is him creating all of these cubes that all describe a six-sided cube with the lines of the vertices, but they don't include all of them. So they start on the side close to us. It's 3 lines describing the open cube, and then it's 4 lines, and then it's 5 lines, and it goes on to 11 lines. And so what I like about this piece is each of these cubes is incomplete, but because they are all incomplete, the community or the herd of them form this complete picture. And there's something romantic about that for me. And a lot of people don't see Silhouette in a romantic light. And I don't think saw his work in a romantic light, but I like this, this idea that all of these pieces are incomplete, but it's because they're all incomplete that they're all together, and all of them form this cohesive unit. So there's something really romantic about that for me. And so for my MFA show, my MFA thesis at the University of Colorado, I recreated his piece out of clay so that you could see the hand and you could see the process of me making every single one of these pieces, and then also making drawings of them that I put on the walls, so you could see this kind of flattening of each of the pieces as well. So that's a little bit of, and I was making pots in graduate school as well, but it wasn't really my main focus. And then I was really focusing on slip casting when I left graduate school. And I will show you, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And I will show you a little bit of the process. So let me know if if you could, well, we'll just do it like this. So were there any questions in that were in the chat? So I'll show you a little bit of my process. So this is a finished piece. So you can see a little bit of the finished piece. I start with a prototype. So here's a prototype, and I use silicone caulking to make this texture on the piece. So then I take a mold of that, and so making a mold, I just use plaster in order to create a mold of that piece, so that then I can make production of this. And so I can make every single piece the same. Slip casting is used in industry and in ceramics in order to make multiples. If you want to make hundreds or thousands of objects, you would use slip casting in order to make the pieces. And so
we definitely can spotlight the other your phone if you prefer.
let's see what this looks like.
Very nice. How many parts is your plaster mold?
5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the bottom is a separate one. So make sure all of those pieces stay together with straps and a bicycle tube. And so what I do is I have 2 different colors. So this is a dark, it's not exactly black, but it's like a dark gray. And then this one is going to be a light gray. And so what I'm going to do is fill up my molds. And then pour it out. So I will let this set upside down for however long it takes until I remember it. And then, so with plaster, plaster is a really absorbent material. And so with slip, which is liquid clay, it absorbs the moisture from the clay, and it starts to form a skin, a layer. And so you can see maybe where it's started to form a little bit of a layer. So when I'm, most people, they will set up all of their molds and pour all of their molds and then just let them set for 10 to 30 minutes, depending on how thick you want it. But because I want different layers of color, I will go ahead and pour like 1 layer, and then I'll pour another layer. And the longer this sits in the plaster molds, the thicker the layer of slip gets. And so if I were to pour it out right now, it would be a really thin layer. But if I were to let it sit for, say, 60 seconds or 2 minutes, then it starts to build up and starts to get a little bit thicker of a layer. So that's, I'll probably just dump that and let that set for a minute. And while that's setting, I will take this mold that I poured earlier today, about an hour and a half ago. And so I like to think of this as like the different rings of a tree as it lines up and as it sits in the mold.
Do you have a predetermined number of layers you do, or is it more just by feel for you?
It's more just by feel. If I'm doing production and if I'm doing like a set of, like say I want to do a set of 6, then I will do all 6 with the same colors, roughly the same amount of time and the same steps of the layers. But when I'm not trying to make them all the same, then there's a little bit of play with it. There's a little bit of experimentation. There's a little bit of like, sometimes I have the patience to do 7 layers, and sometimes I do not have the patience to do 7 layers. So it depends a little bit on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah, the human element is present.
Let's see if, I don't know how well my phone picks up the different layers, but this one, I believe it was gray, black, so 4 layers, and the inside's a little messed up, but not bad. So I'll set this off to the side for 1 second so you can see a little bit of the interior of this one, and I'm going to do another layer of black on that one. So as I'm pouring more and more layers, the plaster is getting saturated with water, and so I have to let it set longer in order to do the same amount of thickness of the piece. So this one I'll set off to the side, and I may not take it out or pour it out until the end. So how much time, what's the time looking like?
We've got 7 minutes left.
Okay. I just wanted to show, this is the one from earlier. And so this is like the fun part. So then taking just a Olfa knife, sharp blade, starting to.
I definitely would have guessed you were using a Sureform instead.
I do on thicker forms, but the Sureform certainly can. I think maybe I did the Sureform on this one. This is one, you can see that little black dot is a hole straight through the cup. So this, I've set up this process that is very much about chance and about randomness and opportunity, but then involved in that is a very high chance for failure. So if I'm not, if I'm listening to a podcast and I'm getting really into it, or some like really good music and I just get carried away, it doesn't take much to just cut through the whole thing, unfortunately. So a lot of trial and error and experimentation and failure is like deeply embedded in this process. But that's why I like it too. So here's kind of the beginning of that emerging of the patterning. And there's something, no 2 cup is ever going to be exactly the same. And so I get to choose if I want to go a little bit deeper over here or a little bit less deep over here. but what results is, I'm starting with this really textured pattern, and because of all of that texture, there's different thicknesses on the interior, and so when I'm cutting it smooth, then all of that variation arrives, or kind of comes out of the form.
Yeah, and that
So
works very much like the rings of a tree, where like if you cut it at different points of the tree, they're going to look slightly different, right?
absolutely, yep. So here's an example of two. These two are this form, and so by varying the order of the colors and the thicknesses and the timing and the thickness that I'm carving, there's just like endless variation. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about silhouette a little bit, because it's the same process every single time. I've set up this like dumb, really labor intensive, really stupid process that takes a lot of energy and has a lot of opportunity for failure. But then, yeah, I get these, different pieces. So from here, after I have it carved, I'll go ahead and bisque it, and then I'll sand it with sandpaper in order to get a smooth surface, and then glaze just the interior, and then I'll sand the exterior again. And this is raw clay, but I'll sand it to like 600 or 1,000 grit, and it makes it really smooth, almost almost like glass, if I've spent enough time sanding it, again depending on my patience for the day. So
so much of what you described as a stupid process, Joshua, just sounds like ceramics to me. I think many of us ceramic artists sort of have that going on in our work, where we overcomplicate things because that's where the joy lives for us,
I mean, why not make it as complicated as we possibly can? Because what else are we going to do with our time?
Yeah, well, it's like very methodical. It's, in a way too, where it's like, okay, here are my steps. Here's what I do. I do it every day. What is the lifetime like on your plaster molds?
Yeah, typically you get 100. I think I was pushing it a little bit more. I had a couple molds that I had been using for a couple of years. When you use plaster molds a lot, they kind of start to break down. But since I am already working with a surface that is very modeled and has a lot of variety to it, I don't mind as much if it starts to get chipped, or sometimes I even start to like use that as an opportunity to make a new surface and a new form, so that I can have a little bit newness to the forms that I'm making. So it's a similar form, but then I get a little bit different of a surface technique and surface quality to it. So yeah, I can use honestly, I use the molds until my shelving unit gets too full and topples over in the middle of the night, and then I have to throw those molds away. So that was a very actually convenient way for me to cull the different molds right before I moved to Denmark. I was stressing about moving and packing and everything, and then I came in and molds were just broken on the floor, so
The universe
off
decided
they went to
for
the
you.
dumpster. It was time for me to leave Philadelphia at that point. I was like, goodbye, get me to Denmark.
Thank you so much for sharing your process.
Yeah.
We have reached our final moment. I just want to encourage everyone who, if you are in town, please do come by Northern Clay Center and feel Josh's pots, because they feel so soft. I think that was one of the, I mean, it's just a really exciting way to interact with a pot anyway. And then it's extra
Thank you. Yeah.
extra exciting when they are that supple and just a pot like a baby's bottom is wonderful. Just so
Thank
soft.
you.
And as a parent, Allison knows that intimately well.
Yeah, no, this is my baby bottom pot.
I had no idea.
Surprise. All right, we'll see you all soon, hopefully back later today. We have more artist talks, we have workshops, we have in-person sales. There's so much to do. If you're in Denmark, you probably can't make it, but otherwise try and make it to NCC. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much, Josh.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a good day. Good luck this weekend.
Thanks.
And thanks everyone for coming.